without further ado, let me introduce Amanda Lee. Amanda is a Master's of Education, and she's the Center Director for Brain Balance in San Diego. Her background is in education, STEM, and wildlife conservation, which is an incredibly interesting combination. Daily, she aims to inspire and be inspired and coaches students and parents to actualize their full potential. As a lifelong learner, she's a sponge for information and active in promoting equity and access to quality education, which we know we need in the county, absolutely. Previous workshop topics she has presented on include dyslexia, defiance, distance learning, executive functioning, early childhood development, outdoor learning, and much more. So without further ado, let me introduce to you our esteemed speaker for today, Amanda Lee. And let's give her our COVID Zoom clap.
Thank you so much, Clyde. I'm really excited to be here with everyone today. I do want this to be as engaging as possible. I've done this workshop a couple times now, primarily training teachers, but also I do a lot with parents. So at Brain Balance, both San Diego and Chula Vista, we do have 2 centers. We are always offering special programs because just like this organization, I want to share information. First and foremost, we are a resource to the community, and that's why I'm so honored to be here today. So let me share my screen and we will get going. And again, if you have questions throughout, please feel free to type it into the chat. And Clyde, I don't mind if you feel like the question is relevant in the moment to just interrupt and we can go there. I'm not someone who cares to wait to the end. While you remember it, please, y'all, do not hesitate. Just type it in so we can answer those questions because we're going to be covering different areas of classroom and home success too. Okay. All right, let me share my screen. All right, do you see the presentation? Perfect, okay.
Yes, we can see it.
Perfect, so our topic today is the developing brain in classroom success. Here's a little bit of our information and how to contact us, but you can see that at the very end on the last slide as well, okay? So a little bit about me, as Clyde mentioned, my background is in education, but I've been primarily in informal education, although I do have experience in the classroom as well. I earned my preliminary credential, but found I can make a bigger impact outside of the classroom, especially in the role I play now, working with quite a few different types of families and students, school districts, and community partners. And really my passion is truly to help everyone meet their potential. And unfortunately, what I have found is oftentimes there's just a band-aid for the challenges that folks experience, whether it's young students or even parents. So our program is really unique in that we look at the full picture and support you from the foundation up, right? Build up that foundation. So today we'll talk about a little bit more about what brain balance is, learning and brain development, at home and distance learning tips, brain breaks you can do, for your kiddos and for yourself, executive functioning. And if you don't know what that is, that's okay, but you will learn a little bit more of what that means. Motivation, if you have a kiddo with big emotions and behavior, how can brain balance help you afterwards? If the tips I've given you, you've tried or you will try and it's not enough, basically, okay? So Brain Balance is a really unique program because, again, we look at the full child and full student, full person, and it's a unique combination of physical, sensory, and cognitive activities that help truly bring overall connectivity to the brain. Because a lot of times the challenges that your kiddos may experience, whether they're diagnosed or not, including academic challenges, social challenges, behavioral challenges, maybe focus or learning, emotional regulation even. A lot of times those are neurodevelopmental disorders, literally just disconnections in the brain. And so, there is no black and white answer. However, if we can just increase the overall functioning of an individual, we can see a lot of improvements, right? And so these sensory motor exercises and simulations and coaching with social emotional learning skills, as well as executive function skills, really help our families in a matter of months see a big change. And then I'm really involved with the essentially care plan, if you will, during and after the program as well, working with schools, working with other providers, because I really truly believe it takes a village to, raise an individual. So together we are much, much more powerful. So please don't feel like you are alone. And again, I appreciate organizations like A Better Life Together and the Bridge Project for being able to share more information. Knowledge is power for sure. So oftentimes, as I mentioned, we tend to look at the tip of the iceberg, just what do you see that's a problem? And then that's what oftentimes the medical community or even schools try to address. And so I call it the Band-Aid, right? What we do that's unique is looking at the root of the problem, what's going on underneath the surface that's causing the challenges. So that's really what's important. And today's presentation, I'm going to help give you some underlying tips to build up that brain and help you understand your child as well, so that there's ideally less frustration, because understanding is really the basis of quality relationships, right? So hopefully you'll get a fuller sense of what's going on. And again, we'll be here to support you afterwards as well if you need more questions. So I would love this to be as engaging as possible. If you feel like typing into the chat box or even private messaging, probably Clyde, maybe myself, I'm not sure if I can see those chats. But the first question is, what is learning? What is learning? I'll give you a sec to answer that. You can always answer it for yourself too and take your own notes.
So just to follow up, I think she's giving you the opportunity to take your phone, your video off mute and actually answer that question.
You can, yeah, you can go off mute or you can type. I see folks typing. I see it.
Okay, here's some typing. So one answer was adapting new things and skills.
Mm-hmm. And understanding things you don't know. I love it. So I can't see the chat.
Oh, you can see it. Perfect.
Yeah.
Okay.
Perfect. Thank you all for participating. So learning, it seems like such a basic question, but when you really have to answer it, right? How do you answer it? So thank you for putting yourself out there. Learning officially in the Oxford English Dictionary is the acquisition of knowledge through experience, study, or being taught. So learning new things, like you said. And it's also the physical process in which new knowledge is represented by new brain cell connections. So that's something people don't tend to think about, but that's how learning happens, right? Sometimes it's this repetition or this bridge of information you already know to information you want to know. And that's the strongest connections, when you can bring that gap together. And in the brain, I don't know if you knew, there's 100 billion neurons in your brain. And so there's so many potential connections that can be made, that can be strengthened, created, and maybe just not quite working the way you want it to for yourself or for your child. So learning is really important in that it is, again, the physical act of building new brain cell connections. So you're on this webinar for a reason, right? You probably are having some challenges with your kiddo. So some common learning challenges include attention and focus, dyslexia, which is challenges with reading, dyscalculia, which is challenges with math, dysgraphia and dyspraxia are challenges with motor development, whether fine or gross motor, and it could affect things like writing, anxiety, reading or comprehension challenges, and executive functioning, which just to give you a little heads up, since I've said it so many times before we get to that slide, is a big overarching umbrella for things like motivation, emotional regulation, time management, organization. So if you don't mind sharing, you don't have to either if it's a personal thing. I want to get a sense of what you're dealing with, so I can kind of cater this to you too. So again, I believe you can, if you don't want to share with the whole group, you can share with me privately, I believe. What are some of the challenges that you are experiencing with your kiddo? And if it's not and you just want to learn, that's totally fine too. I think, again, knowledge is power.
I think for me, a big part is anxiety and executive functioning these days with some of the individuals we support, plus, my own children.
Yeah. Yeah, I hear that unfortunately quite a bit. The anxiety has gone through the roof, especially during the pandemic. But even before the pandemic, kiddos are experiencing so much anxiety for different reasons. There's social reasons, there's academic reasons, there's their own challenges where they're not performing as they would like or able to control their own emotions, which brings on that anxiety. Just new experiences, just sensory processing challenges that really bring on that anxiety as well. And then executive function, for sure, we hear quite a bit of, and schools are talking about more and more. And then someone said reading comprehension. Yep, so maybe your child is totally fine reading, but the reading comprehension, whether it's understanding big picture or the details, that's a big challenge. We see that quite a bit as well. Okay, thank you for sharing. Okay, so here are some signs of learning challenges if you're not sure, or maybe you think it's a behavior issue, but remember, every underlying behavior, you really need to understand the intent and reason rather than reacting to the situation. Really try to pause and respond. And so oftentimes learning challenges can look like this. Schoolwork is not often completed and brought home. Maybe teachers keep sending things home. It could be the kiddo struggling, and it really could be a number of factors, but that's something to think about if they're consistently bringing work home. And by the way, that consistency, that pattern of behavior is generally what I ask parents to consider when they wonder, is this a problem or is this normal? If it's, they bring home work every now and then, no big deal. But if it's every day, which I do have parents like that, then there's something more going on. And just taking the work home probably is not good enough to help them, okay? Maybe homework time is a battle. Maybe they're totally fine at school, but when they come home, they can be a terror, or it's just a nightmare, right? It's just not a fun experience, and your relationship with your child feels like it's deteriorating. I see that a lot and hear that a lot, unfortunately. Maybe schoolwork that normally would take 10 minutes, maybe half an hour, takes hours. I hear that a lot as well. Maybe reading and writing is long and laborious or stressful. Maybe your kiddo keeps forgetting instructions. Maybe they can't follow multi-step instructions, not even just with school, but at home. Maybe your child gets frustrated or easily frustrated or does task avoidance. I hear that a lot. So maybe they're not defiant, but they're definitely not quite getting on task, right? Maybe your kiddo's self-confidence and esteem is lacking. Maybe they're starting to say words like I'm stupid, right? Unfortunately, I hear that too. Maybe they actually are a grade level or more behind in whatever subject. Maybe your kid is just exhausted at the end of the school day, right? Because they put so much energy and effort into learning or regulating themselves throughout the day. And then something that we see physiologically are a lot of headaches and stomach aches on school days, right? So it's like avoidance, but they may not even be able to control that. They may be making it up, but they may not be able to control it either. It's just their body's stress response, okay? So maybe some of this resonates with you, or someone where that may resonate. So I wanted to show you this picture. I really like it. It's from another company, but I like it because it breaks it down to show you how the various regions of the brain are responsible for a lot of different areas of functioning. The thing is, traditionally, neuroscience, we used to think, oh, just work on this part of the brain, like the frontal lobe. You can see that golden color there is very large. That's an area responsible for a lot of learning and executive functioning, and that's an area that grows the slowest. It doesn't fully mature until you're about age 25 or so. However, what we know now today, the research shows, it's more importantly the connections between the different regions that are essential. Yes, you still have to stimulate those different regions, but the connections between the regions are what is most essential. And again, nothing is black and white. It's not just, oh, stimulate this region to make this work best. There are many different components of the brain that have to come together for us to function every day, from taking in the world around us with visual processing, to the emotional regulation, to learning, critical thinking, and more, okay? So just remember, the brain is complicated and we have to stimulate it all. And that's also what makes some programs, like if you have experienced tutoring a lot or doing other types of interventions for years and you're seeing very little success, likely it's because, yes, that area that you're stimulating being stimulated. However, those overall connections are not quite coming together to give you that foundation for that information like tutoring to stick, right? So that's another clue. If you've been trying the same thing for quite a while now, it's kind of like the definition of madness, right? Doing the same thing, expecting something different. Something more is going on. So you need, again, think about the foundation of what's happening, okay? So the basis of our program and overall best functioning, again, not perfect people, but best functioning and meeting your potential, is that those connections are connected, right? Those left and right hemispheres in those regions are all flowing like they're supposed to. Unfortunately, when there's an imbalance and a disconnection, then it can show up in different ways, whether your kiddos are having a hard time learning, making friends, behaving appropriately, or even body coordination. That's a good clue too. So at Brain Balance, here is an example of what we share with parents between left and right brain weaknesses. Again, nothing is black and white. It's not, most people are not just strictly left or right brain weak. However, in our assessment, we're able to share where the bigger challenges are so that we can stimulate those regions to get the overall connections flowing. So where we can be biased, we will, but overall it is a whole brain connectivity. And some early indicators, again, of imbalance include missed milestones. One of the main questions I tend to ask when I meet with parents is, did they crawl when they were supposed to? Did they crawl the correct pattern? Did they walk and talk when they were supposed to? Do they have appropriate fine motor skills? Can they ride a bike, swim, etc.? What was the feedback from teachers while they're in school? You know, do they know their letters and numbers, or are they struggling, or can they control their emotions or focus in any way that's developmentally appropriate? Okay, so we'll talk more about that, I think, a little bit later on. So as I mentioned, what research shows is that the connectivity between the different regions and those network hubs, as they call it, are strongly associated with the severity of learning difficulties, but also with mental health concerns. And so things like ADHD is literally disconnections in the brain. Oftentimes medication for things like attention deficit hyperactive disorder is to bridge, make that artificial bridge across those different regions of the brain. And so in our program, we do a lot of research with folks like Harvard, University of San Francisco right now, University of California, San Francisco, but also Cambridge Brain Sciences, who came out with this study, which is separate from us. But in our study, I think the official paper just got released too. The preliminary study said 11 of the 12 cognitive tasks that we look at with the students who went through our program had a statistically significant change. And so we looked at areas like attention, inhibition, different types of reasoning, and memory, different types of memory as well. And so it's really encouraging to see that, yes, with this neat combination of sensory motor exercise and stimulations, you know, work in the full body, full brain, we can really improve those aspects of our functioning. And so, as I mentioned, getting to the root of the issue is key. Oftentimes, parents come in wanting to improve these cognitive tasks like focus and memory, learning, comprehension, as you mentioned earlier, reasoning, but it's all tied to executive function as well, right? How do you make sure you have impulse control and manage your own behaviors and emotions and are motivated? I hear that a bunch. Organization, you know, maybe your kiddo's desk or backpack is just a hot mess, or their binders just can't do it. But again, these are all skills that you have to learn by first improving those cognitive tasks, which means you have to improve the overall connectivity first. So think about the root issue and not just hammering those skills. The way I like to think about it is we keep trying to give kids these tools. However, if they don't have the toolbox to retain those tools, right, or an appropriate toolbox, then it's not likely that those skills, those tools will stick as consistently as you would like. So maybe you see erratic behavior and performance as well. So the good news is the brain can change. Has anyone heard of the word neuroplasticity? If you have, I think you could do a little emoji, just a little raise hand or clap or however you want to do it. Neuroplasticity. If I can see your face, you can touch your nose. That's one of my tricks. If not, that's okay. Neuroplasticity is something I hope that you all hear more and more and more about in the coming years. It's definitely been much more prominent in media. But essentially what that means is the brain is capable of changing. So even though supposedly our brain is completely done developing, if you will, by age about 25, the connections in those regions, though, can forever be developed and improved all the way into, you know, your last, you know, breath, basically. So it's important to keep engaging the brain and training the brain no matter what stage you're in. Oftentimes I'll have parents also ask me, is it too late for my kid? Never, ever is it too late. However, there are times in your child's development, especially in early childhood, those first few years of life up into even 6, right, that are critical for different components of development, like language development, and motor development. However, we can keep stimulating and improving that throughout their entire lives. So it's never too late. So neuroplasticity, again, is the brain's ability to change and adapt as a result of experience. And so, as we talked about in the very beginning, what is learning? Learning physically changes the brain. Even this conversation right now, what's really neat is, you know, that saying how, you make a stronger impact on folks than you realize. Literally, that is true with every interaction you have with the world around you, whether it's an inanimate object or with you all through this webinar, essentially. We forever change each other because those connections in our brain are never the same again. And I think that's really powerful to think about. So we do have a pretty strong impact on one another's lives. So if engaging the brain is so important, how do we do it at Brain Balance, especially in that holistic way? This is a simple-ish developmental pyramid and some pictures of some of our students working out at the center. And our program is completely customized to each individual, because just having a general program also is not great for a student, because you need to meet them where they're at. And I think that's what's most difficult for teachers as well as parents, because you have these certain expectations of your kiddo, whether because of age or grade or just your own expectations, high expectations of them. But it's still important to know, where are they performing? Where are they developing? So we look at something like primitive reflexes, which is the base of this developmental pyramid here. That's something I imagine most of you have not heard about. And oftentimes you only really looked at for your kiddo when they were first born. These reflexes were present from the womb until they were born, till usually about age 1 or 2. However, these reflexes are supposed to essentially go away to allow for normal development. They were there for survival, but eventually your body and your brain is supposed to take over and grow and develop as normal. However, the students that we tend to see, and I imagine most likely at least one or more of your students that you work with or children, tend to have one or more of these reflexes retained when they have the types of struggles that we're talking about today, because it literally means when you retain these reflexes that you don't have full control of your own body. And so of course it's going to affect things like learning or motor development. But sensory motor skills are essential. Moving your body and your various senses are critical for triggering the different billion plus neurons in your brain. So we're looking at various sensory motor skills, including gross motor and fine motor, dominance profile. Does your brain, is it able to just pick a hand, for instance, to use instead of having to think about it and be inefficient? We look at body awareness. Do they have balance? Do they have a solid vestibular system, an internal GPS, essentially? Visual processing is a big thing that we look at that a lot of people don't look at either. And it's strongly correlated with difficulty with focus. So we'll look at various components of visual processing as well as auditory processing. And then also activities like bilateral movement. And there's quite a few different bilateral activities that we ask kids to do to see how are the different regions of the brain, especially the two hemispheres, working with one another to coordinate their body like a jumping jack. Seemingly simple, but actually is quite difficult for kids with neurodevelopmental disorders. And then ultimately, rhythm and timing too. Are you able to respond to the stimuli around you and respond appropriately, right? So in these pictures, you can see the kiddos working on these various components of the program, all designed to them at their specific levels. And the goal, of course, is to be developmentally appropriate or age appropriate, okay? So Harvard, I mentioned we do research with, and this is something that was neat. So in 2019, they came out with their white paper showing that the preliminary evidence shows the brain connectivity in an individual with ADHD actually seemed to be as effective as medication. And I thought that was, not just me, sorry, the community finds that extremely rewarding and powerful evidence that medication and the medical route isn't the only way. I'm not against it, and I'm not saying that's not the right course for some families, because some kiddos do need it, right? However, if you are interested in a non-medical approach and you're looking at a longer term solution, then this is a direction, that multi-sensory approach, however you do it at home or with an organization like ours, is really key to, again, build that foundation and build that solid connection in the brain to reduce those disconnections. At home, as I mentioned, in general, move that body, engage those various senses, because A lot of research has also shown when you engage the body in some kind of physical exercise, you're going to learn a lot better too. So, especially in elementary school, we, at least before distance learning, had a chance to generally run around the playground before school started, right? That's really important. But think about the kiddos who get into middle school, get into high school, that becomes less and less and less. And therefore it becomes harder and harder to focus, right? Things get harder and they're not moving their body and brain and just engaging their senses enough. And so those connections, they need to be stimulated for you to learn. Okay, so get those kiddos to run around still, even if they're learning at home. And we'll talk about that later. So here, later as of now. So at home, movement matters. Really engage your muscles to engage your brain. In the morning, as I mentioned, really do 3 to 5 minutes of elevated heart rate to start. I try to do that myself, even if I only have 5 minutes. That's better than nothing, right? So I'll do some quick squats, some ab workout, and maybe push-ups. That's simple, 5 minutes, and then I go to work, right? So that's a really good thing. Or just even taking a walk, that's something at least. And making sure you take frequent brain breaks. I'm going to talk more about that, but typically we tend to take brain breaks when we're fatigued. And the big secret is you're supposed to take these breaks before you're fatigued. Okay, so we'll talk about that. And then, screen time is a big challenge for a lot of families right now and just this generation. But I'm not against it. Just balance it with movement, right? If you want to watch a 30-minute show, make sure you run around and play for 30 minutes, before or after. So again, balance is really, really key. So setting up your student for success. There's a few different tips I have for you. So exercise, as I mentioned, in general, get your body moving, get into extracurriculars, go to the park, go take a hike. I hike literally every single week. So if you want tips on where to go for hiking, whether a family hike or a more moderate hike, I can help you there. Send me a message. Limit the screen time, of course. Screen time does fatigue the brain, and for some students, it affects them more than others. I've definitely had families where they reduce screen time or eliminate screen time and just giving them 10 minutes. You see a huge difference. 1 hour makes a huge difference. So know your child. In general, the advice is no more than 2 hours for most kiddos. If they're very young, like I think 0 to 5, I believe, it's 0 screen time. So just do what works for your family though, all right? Healthy nutrition is really important. This is something a lot of folks don't take seriously enough, I would say. Nutrition is a part of our program as well. What you put in your body does affect your brain, how you behave, how you focus, your energy levels. So eat healthy, low inflammatory diet is recommended too. What we ask our families to do during phase 1 of our program is to eliminate, eventually at least, get to the point where you can eliminate gluten and dairy and refined sugars, which tend to be the most inflammatory. It doesn't mean that those are inflammatory foods for your child or for yourself, but just in case, if you've never done an elimination diet, it's something to consider. And a lot of my families do learn quite a bit. But healthy nutrition is key. Reduce those sugars, like I mentioned, that's huge. And fast food or processed foods, that is key. And you may see a big difference there. Sleep is another big one. If you don't have healthy sleep patterns, sleep is essential for those brain connections, right? And solidifying information you've learned through the day. Sleep deprivation is definitely the most dangerous, how do I put it? Way to function, honestly, right? You are more impaired when you don't have enough sleep than when you are intoxicated, for instance, with alcohol or other drugs. So definitely make sure you have good sleep habits. One thing I like to advise parents to do is put a go to bed alarm. We tend to have wake up alarms, but what time should you be going to bed to get adequate sleep? Something to also keep in mind, kiddos with neurodevelopmental disorders, they're working on overdrive, right? To process the world around them. They tend to need more sleep than the average person. So definitely make sure you have that routine and you're getting adequate sleep every day, not just during weekends or whatever. Training their attention. This is something I hear a lot with parents. I know they can pay attention. They can play video games for hours, but keep in mind that video games are a different type of attention than doing chores or doing schoolwork. And I do presentations on that too. So on our YouTube page, you can kind of look back on those webinars, okay? But you can train them to have engaged, sustained, non-reward driven activities like puzzles and board games, riding a bike, baking even, right? You have to delay that reward until the end. So you can train them. Teaching independence and problem solving, that's huge. A lot of times parents try to do it all, or you think it's easier if I just do it for them and it avoids frustration, but you're not setting them up for success then, right? And you're not setting yourself up for success either. You want to teach them to eventually build up those executive function skills, but also teach them growth mindset, which is the idea that you have to fail to grow. Literally, I've been telling young kids this for years and years now. If you don't fail or if things aren't hard, your brain literally will not grow. That's the science. So in the last workshop I did for teachers, I told them just blame everything on the brain. Right? The brain needs you to push it. Right? If things were easy, what's the point of school, right? So schedule and routine is huge. Even in the summer, I really advise parents right now. It's the end of July now. School's around the corner if you're not back in school yet. I know some schools are already back. Really get in that routine and building up that bedtime schedule, and waking up, breakfast, what's expected of them. Get that underway slowly but surely, so that by the time school is around the corner, or school is back in session, that it's not this big shift. All right, sometimes parents try to do it the night or two before, even maybe the week before, and that's really not enough time. So build up that schedule routine and be consistent throughout the school year. That consistency and that structure is really essential for everyone, especially kids who have behavioral or defiance challenges. They may seem like they want to just do whatever they want, but they really are craving structure. And then I was asked to share a little bit more about distance learning for you all. So I went ahead and added these components. So plan ahead. If you're at home learning, plan ahead. It's going to take some work on your end to talk with the teachers, but know what their schedule is, what's the daily lesson plans, get those lesson plans ahead of time even, establish that morning, midday, and evening routine, not just the morning. Review with your child what's going on, what's expected of them. Maybe they need a visual calendar, or maybe you need that calendar checklist, right? Building in those executive function or EF skills. Making sure the setting is appropriate too, right? Oftentimes the dining room has become also the classroom and also the family room, whatever it may be. But make sure that there is that routine and structure to switch from one thing to another, making sure there's not too many distractions, and flexible seating, I think, is important too. Why do they have to sit at the table unless they can't function very well somewhere else? They've proven that they can't do it, but give them that flexibility if they can. And think about ergonomics too. As adults, we hopefully tend to think about how we're sitting and working and what's comfortable. For kiddos, they're oftentimes smaller, and so sitting at, say, a dining table, the computer might be too high for them, or their chair is too low, so make those adjustments. Like right now, literally, I have my computer on a box right now to be the right level, so I'm not looking down at the screen. So think about that, okay? Even for the kids, kinesthetic learning is really important too, getting their body moving, as I talked about, and as multi-sensory as possible. That is key. Singing a song and clapping as they're learning vocabulary, that's going to make things stick in their brain better. Taking those appropriate breaks, which we'll talk about next, and then you have to take care of yourself as well. Make sure you're eating healthy meals, make sure you're staying hydrated, you're taking breaks and being mindful, and taking those breaths, I think is huge, because if you're stressed, your kids are going to be stressed, right? They're going to feel your anxiety as well. So make sure you are taking care of number one before you try to take care of the rest of the family, okay? Any questions so far, by the way? I haven't seen anything pop up. I know I'm cruising along. I want to make sure I respect your time. Let's see, I just saw a new message. Great, so thanks, Lawson. I think your name is Lawson. She said that she did some kid-friendly stretching exercise for a few minutes before they started and noticed a big difference in attention in class. Yep, so we're gonna talk more about that next right now. Structure and routine first. Okay, so structure and routine, working with the teacher, know what's on the agenda, the homework assignments, projects, tests. I definitely hear from parents, these surprise tests or homework assignments have been missing for a while and they had no idea. You have to navigate your own life too. And so I don't think it hurts to be more proactive in asking the teachers what's going on, and then putting in your own routine, checking, Power Classroom or whatever your school system is, you can check a lot of those assignments too. So learning those tools is also important. I know oftentimes the kids are like, I don't get it, I don't know what to do, even though everything is listed on the calendar for them, they still have to have the skills to check that calendar and understand project management, right? So teaching your kids and building up your own project management skills is key. Getting organized is really important, right? Tools and structure, consider using the organization chart to track your daily routines. Remember, it's something you have to teach them to do though. Some kiddos with visual processing challenges, even though it looks all great with this big calendar and it's color coded and you have all these tabs, that might be actually overwhelming for them. So again, experiment and see what works for your family and for your child. Also a system for remembering homework, right? Do you have a binder where things are divided up and so they know how to move information around? A homework log could be helpful. And then if you are doing a hybrid option and maybe your kiddo is just disorganized, why try to get them to move a pencil box, for instance, from home to school and back when you can just have 2 sets, right? That can save so much stress. Even books, you can ask the schools for accommodations and say, hey, can I have another copy for home and one for school? Because maybe your kiddo just keeps forgetting to bring it back and forth. That is, again, a skill that not everyone is capable of. Okay, so duplicate those tools, simple requests generally. Teaching time management is what I talked about, right? Breaking down projects. After school routine is vital as well. When do you want them to do homework? How long are their breaks? All that. So that is not just free for all. And then what are the rewards for completing homework? Do you get more outdoor time? Do you get a little bit more screen time? Verbal praise is important too. It shouldn't always be extrinsic rewards. Research has shown for a long time now, if you are just doing extrinsic rewards, which is something tangible essentially, then the motivation really isn't sustainable. So make sure you mix it up, okay? Okay, brain breaks. I definitely want to do this with you. So brain breaks is time away from whatever you're focusing on. So that we know, but when and how long is usually the question, right? So if you're in grade school, usually it's about every 10 to 15 minutes. And if you're in high school, middle school, high school, it's usually about every 20 to 30 minutes. If your kiddos can last longer, great, right? Especially when you're engaged and you like what you're learning or whatever's happening. It doesn't mean every 15 minutes you set an alarm and like, okay, take a break. It's do it, again, judge where your kiddos are at, do it before they're tired or distracted, okay? And the other big misconception is that these brain breaks need to be long, right? I tend to hear 5, 10, 30-minute breaks, and that blows my mind because who has time for that, right? I definitely don't. I barely take my own breaks, but I definitely make sure I do in those 10-second, 1 minute, 3 minute, 5 minute intervals. That's really all that you need. And the other thing with brain breaks is it doesn't always have to be this physical, get out there and run. It could be a quiet activity too. So the goal is to reduce the stress and frustration, increase attention and productivity, but it must be done in an appropriate time frame. Okay, so plan ahead too. Do you want it to be an interval breaks? So like, hey, every 15 minutes or so, or tied to behaviors like, hey, do 4 math problems. Every 4 math problems, you can take a break out of the 10 or something like that. Okay. So I want to try some of these things with you, and I have some tips here. So mindful minute is huge. Just taking that breath is really important. So I'm gonna have everyone for a sec, since everyone is sitting, if you don't mind just standing up for a sec. It's okay if I don't see you, but stand up because we've been chatting for just a half hour now. Maybe you need a break now too. Go ahead and stand up. One thing we tend to do with students is wiggle. So what about you just wiggle your body? Let me scoot back a little bit. You can see me. A little wiggle loosens up your spine. All right. And then I want everyone to take a deep breath and curl down slowly and get kind of bend yourself in half until you can maybe touch your knees or your calves or even your ankles if you can. So take a deep breath and exhale down. Hold it there for a sec. You can kind of shake your rump back and forth, kind of like a no. You can even shake your head a yes, or shake it no. Kind of loosen that spine. And then take a deep breath. And as you exhale, just slowly roll your way back up, bone by bone, and just kind of roll those shoulders out. So that's one of my favorite stretches. It's just so basic, but there's so many different stretches you can do with the kiddos. Go ahead and take a seat. I'm going to teach you some other ones you can do while you're sitting. Sorry. Thumbs up if you feel a little bit better, just that little stretch. I definitely do, yeah. All right, when you're sitting, maybe you need a little break. I tend to do this. I'll zone out and I'll look away for a little bit. You can do something called piano fingers. This is good for fine motor skills and focus and coordination for our students. So if you tap your index finger to your thumb and then your middle finger to your thumb and keep going down the line and back, we call these piano fingers. So this is a good little stretch for your fingers. You can go quick. You can do both hands at the same time. You can really stretch those fingers out as you tap too and take your time. This is a good little break for the fingers. Doodling is nice. One thing I really love to do is mirror, and I'll do my best to explain it, but hopefully it makes sense. Mirror is something you can do with if you have multiple kids, or you can do it with your kid, where you can sit or stand, and one person will be the mover and shaker, and the other one will be the mirror. So if I'm moving my right hand this way, see if you can copy me right now through the screen. You want to mirror and follow me. I'm moving my left hand. Can you follow with probably your right hand? Yep. In, out. So this is really good for the brain. Oh, now you gotta think. Oh, how do you do it? Yep. Another really, I see some folks like, let me think. One really great way to engage the brain too and make it think a little bit harder is doing the opposite. So for instance, if I have this hand up high, rather than copying with your left hand, try doing it with your right hand now. And then if I'm pulling back, you go forward. I see some thinking, yep. So again, you're not trying to mirror me anymore. You're trying to do the opposite, right? So again, using the different parts of your brain, okay? So mirror, I really love. You can do sitting, standing. You can have, student A, student B switch after about 30 seconds or so, and then move on, okay? Jumping jacks are really great. I talked about earlier how that's not the simplest for kiddos. So this is a good test too to see if there's some, disconnections happening. Can your child actually jump out all together at the same time and jump in together at the same time? So arms up and feet out all the way, and then back together all the way, all together simultaneously and synchronously. And if they can do it, can they do it 20 in a row, 30 in a row, 40 in a row? Sometimes we'll see kids be able to do it. However, they can't sustain it. Their brain gets confused. So that's a key that some things, disconnections might be happening, but maybe they can't even do one. You're like, oh wait, they're doing it really awkward, and the upper body's in, but the bottom is out. Cross crawls is another really good one that's difficult for the brain, but for most kiddos in elementary school, they should be able to go from, say, the right hand. If you go ahead and put your right hand up, tap it to your left knee, bring your left knee up and tap it, and then switch. Left hand, tap it to your right knee and switch, and see if you can sustain that back and forth, back and forth. So this is a really good one for your kids to take that break too and engage both hemispheres of the brain. High knees are just bringing it up, raising the heart rate. Push-ups and sit-ups. A lot of my teachers like that for their kids. Like, all right, quick push-ups, everyone, even against the wall. And then balance is really important, a great indication of how well your kids' brains are working too. Can they do a one-leg balance on just a flat surface without falling over for 10, 20, 30 to 60 seconds, right? If they can, switch legs, see if both sides of the body are balanced. If they can, great. Now try doing it with their eyes closed. That's completely different bodily system. And they have to, again, regulate to be able to balance without their eyes open. And then maybe you move to an uneven surface, like standing on a pillow, throw a pillow. That's a great thing to work on. Nature play I really promote. So that's why climbing around on logs and boulders are great, because you really have to engage the core and work those different systems in your body, okay? So those are some ideas for some brain breaks. I have a lot more in my other presentations, but I thought this is good to try. Irma, thank you, that's okay, but this is gonna be recorded so you can see more later on, okay? And I think, Claude, you're gonna post it on the website and YouTube, right? So it will be available to you, Irma, and I believe I'll get a copy too, and it'll be on our website as well, our YouTube website as well.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you so much.
Have a good day. Say good night. All right, executive functioning. Let's move on to that. Executive function refers to the brain-based skills required for humans to execute or do a task. So oftentimes we talked about it is that focus and that time management and that organization, but those all lead to EF skills that are crucial for making decisions. Literally, if you're thirsty, you have to make the decision to get up and get yourself some water or milk or whatever it is, right? Some people don't have that skill. They may be hungry and not be able to communicate or do anything about that, right? So those are more lower functioning individuals that we have to train to be able to do that skill, right? And again, think about that. It's not such an easy thing to do, right? There's multiple components in our everyday functioning, especially when it comes to EF skills. So we need it to make decisions, to learn, to problem solve, regulate our behaviors, achieve goals, and more. And it's a skill, which means we're not born with it. We have to foster and grow it throughout our lives. And one of the best ways for them to do that is by seeing you model those skills. You help them practice those skills. You have humility and humbleness, and show how when you mess up, this is how we're growing too. So nobody is perfect. We do not use that word here. We always say practice makes progress. There is no such thing as perfection. So that's something to think about for your kids too. And a lot of us tend to have a combination of stronger executive function skills and weaker executive function skills. So we are not perfect, like I said. This link here also gives you a guide to some other ways to improve, and I think we'll talk more about that next. So here's some examples of executive functioning. So behavior, we talked about impulse control, that's self-regulation and problem solving, flexible thinking, motivation, working memory, organization, time management, prioritization, and task initiation. That's something I definitely hear a lot of challenge with as well. They know they're supposed to do something, but can they do it? It's not even about avoidance necessarily, it's just they can't even initiate that task. So here's some ways to improve executive function skills. This is a very obviously condensed tips, but hopefully it's something. When you're young, playing games is really important. Board games, card games, puzzles, because you learn things like how to follow rules, developing your different motor skills, reasoning skills, attention for sure, right? Because you have to sustain yourself through the game and actually last the game, and especially dealing with losing and frustrations is important as well, right? We tend to give those trophy you tried for any activity and ribbons, but it's not always the best. We have to tell kiddos we just have to put our best foot forward, and it's not always going to be rewarded, but this is how we grow, right? Instruments, dancing, martial arts, organized sports, those are great too, because it provides that structure and builds up the different body coordination. Everything we talk about, by the way, when you get to the next age, like 12 and plus, it still applies to them. So the 12+ year olds, playing board games, instruments, dancing, organized sports, that's also still important. But more importantly for them at this stage in life is probably utilizing planners and learning study skills. How do they talk to themselves, and how do they self-reflect on the situation and how they are learning or how they're reacting with friends or their own emotions? That's huge to teach things like planning and prioritization and time management, goal setting for sure. And then just that self-monitoring, self-evaluation, stress tolerance for sure is important too, okay? So there's some ways to improve yourself or your kiddos' executive function skills. Motivation is something I hear quite a bit of being a challenge for some of our families, not all, but some. And again, you have to come back and think down to the foundation. Why are they not being motivated? Why are they avoiding that task, whatever it is? If you haven't heard of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, this is a basic child development and teaching concept that we all have basic needs that need to be met before we can kind of move forward in life. So think about yourself. If you're hungry, or if you're uncomfortably hot or cold, or if you need to use the restroom, are you going to be able to focus in that meeting, right? Or in that class? I definitely can't. I'm just thinking, when can I use the restroom? Even driving, I think about that. If I really need to use the restroom, I know I'm not driving it safe because I'm thinking about where's the next stop instead of my surrounding, right? So your child's basic needs are important. And that's why you use the restroom, make sure they're fed well and rested well. That's important. And then safety and security, right? Is there something stressful going on between friendships, between the home environment? That's key too. And then do they have friends? They feel like they belong. Ultimately, if things if their foundation's a little bit more solid, then they're going to be able to learn and enjoy life much more, right? So think about their physical, emotional, and mental needs when you're thinking about how motivated or unmotivated they are. Another thing is oftentimes when people are not motivated, they don't really understand the point. So if you want your kids to do something, do they know why? Or is it just, dumb? I hear teenagers say that a lot, but that's because they don't get why we're trying to do a program like Brain Balance, why it's important for them to do math, why it's important for them to follow the chores at home, right? Why is really key. I call it the so what factor. So helping anyone understand why is key and not just do as I say, right? That's usually not very successful. The other question is, do they have the skills? Do they have the executive functioning skills to do what you're asking them to do or what is expected of them? Even homework, right? Maybe they're supposed to do a math worksheet, but maybe they don't really understand how to do the math, all right? They don't have the foundational skills for that. So that's huge. And even reading. I have families, quite a few who the kiddos have a hard time reading. It's not easy. If it's not easy for them to read, of course they don't want to read on their own or read leisurely. That sounds horrible to them. So building up those skills are important. And then motivation, right? So what lights them up? What are those rewards, intrinsic versus extrinsic we talked about earlier? So sometimes you do got to throw in those little rewards. That's what keeps all of us chugging along, right? What's the carrot? And then growth mindset is huge. Some kids are not motivated to try because they feel like they fail all the time. And that's heartbreaking, right? That self-esteem is so low. They don't even want to try because they know they're not going to do well. So these kids need a win, and they need to understand that they have to struggle to succeed, and it's okay that they're struggling. That's why you're there to help them. And that's why Brain Balance is there to help them, or whether teachers there, whoever it is, we're there to support them, because being perfect is unrealistic. Okay. So making sure you're not modeling that. I mean, you're modeling the growth mindset and not modeling and saying things about perfection. Okay. One thing for the older kiddos, since I'm not sure how old the kiddos you're working with are, SMART goals are really, really important. Again, knowing your why, and then asking yourself, what do you want? Why do you want it? And how will you achieve it? How is really important. If you don't have SMART goals, then it's very unlikely these goals will be achieved. So they need to be specific. Most goals are way too broad. Think about New Year's resolutions. Majority of these folks who make New Year's resolutions don't achieve it because it's too broad. Like, I want to lose weight, or I want to learn this skill, but they have no plan in place. So make sure it's specific, make sure you have measurable goals, that they're actually achievable, right? And then realistic to your life and timely as well. So having those mini goals in between is huge. And our Brain Balance in our program, it's the same deal, right? We understand where they're at after the assessment, but we have very specific SMART goals all throughout their sessions, as well as monthly progress report meetings to go over those goals. Oops. Big emotions and behavior. I want to talk about this real quick. We get families wondering, like, what do I do? They're meltdowns, and it's just a blow up at home sometimes. So think about those needs again, what's frustrating them, and just remember, behavior is a result of development, right? What is going on in their brain? What are they not able to respond to appropriately? So the more our brain matures, the better we can tolerate the sensory input, maybe sounds, textures, visual stimuli. A lot of times, if they're sensitive to the environment around them, yeah, they're going to be angsty and on edge, right? The more they can inhibit their action or reaction, so like not reacting physically or saying, word vomit, right? Keeping it together even when frustrated, right? Again, that low frustration tolerance is something I see often, but they need to build up that skill in their brain, and then transition past the meltdowns or whatever their upset is faster. So I see that a lot in our program. Kiddos who would have a meltdown that will last maybe the whole day and just ruin the whole day. I've had families who said they haven't been on vacation because they can't handle it, to over a course of a few months, like, oh my God, my kiddo said, I'm mad. They're still mad, but they're able to vocalize it, or they can turn around within 10 minutes or 2 hours versus the whole day, and just they're able to enjoy their time together more. So that is huge, but it takes time. Okay. Breaking the cycle is key. We've done a lot of presentation on this, and we'll probably have another defiance workshop coming up later this year, but oftentimes it is a cycle, right? Parents give a command, the kiddos refuse, or they task avoidance, whatever's happening. But then once you become agitated or irritable, that's where the cycle continues. So you really have to, again, manage yourself, keep yourself neutral and not feed into this negative cycle, because when you get upset and raise, up the ante, they're going to up the ante. And oftentimes this brownish color, they're at the top left corner there, caregiver gives up or succeeds. Basically what that means is they scream louder than you and you gave in, meaning you're reinforcing. If I just scream louder and yell back or refuse long enough, I'm going to get my way anyway, right? So stop the cycle. Make sure that you are keeping cool. And maybe even I had a teacher tell me, she used to tell this to her parents, or not parents, sorry, her own child, but also her own students, that I love you too much to argue with you, right? I love you too much to not let you succeed, or whatever it may be. So if your kid is up in the ante and they're screaming louder, just remember, as difficult as it is in that moment, what you're doing is working. That's why they're upping the ante, right? So what you're doing is working. Of course, it's easier said than done. Trust me, I get it. But as best as you can, you're not perfect either. As best as you can, manage yourself, okay? All right, and then I love this. This is the 3 R's, something I think about on a regular in my own life. You have to, when there is a situation happening, you have to regulate yourself or your child first, then relate to them before you try to reason. Oftentimes we start trying to reason or bargaining with them, like, if you stop crying, I'll give you a toy, or why are you doing this? Tell me what's wrong. They can't do that yet. When your body goes into that fight or flight mode and you're really just experiencing the woes of the world, that communication channel in your brain actually shuts off, right? So that's, again, survival. So you have to regulate those emotions first with breath, with movement, with soft touch or deep pressure. Regulate them. Then you can relate to them. It's like, I see that you're upset. You're not necessarily agreeing or you're not necessarily okay with their behavior, but you're relating to them and having that empathy and understanding. Again, that's key to relationships, right? And modeling that for them to show others in the future is key, and to themselves, that self-compassion. And then you can talk about what happened afterwards, but don't try to reason until they're regulated, okay? All right, so research more on mental health, since we talked about anxiety. Remember, there is a lot that has to do with the connections in the brain. It's not always a hormonal or whatever imbalance. Oftentimes it's not actually. And brain balance, which really cool, last year came out, the research where nearly all the kids who went through our program had a 40 to 50% improvement in mental health. And I couldn't agree more. I don't see how you cannot come out happier and have higher confidence. That's one of the best byproducts of our program. Yes, we are physically moving our bodies and building those connections in the brain, but you're also learning the growth mindset. You're also building that relationship with your coach. You're also building that relationship with your family and doing well in school. And I call it the positive snowball effect. So if you can raise them up from the bottom up, right, rather than the superficial, like, hey, let's go shopping, as a reward, that's what's really the long-term rewards of supporting them, basically, okay? All right, so it takes a team, as I said. It's okay if you've done it all and you're exhausted and you need help. That's why organizations like B.R.I.D.G.E and A Better Life Together and Brain Balance are here. Please ask for help. Ask your teachers for help. There's a lot of consultants out there. If you have IEPs or 504 plans, we just had a workshop last night. There are a lot of resources in the community. And if you need help getting access to those resources, please reach out to one of us. Even if it's not our specialty, I have a lot of community partners, and so does Clyde, of course, to share information. So ask for help. In our assessment, I'll talk a little bit about that with brain balance. If you need to know more because you haven't found the right solutions or folks haven't given you the answers you want, maybe it's time to reach out to an organization like ours. In our assessment, like I said, we give you the full picture of what's happening. And so in this developmental pyramid, again, we'll assess quite a few different areas. Typically, it takes about an hour and a half to 2 hours. Quite hands-on, somewhat physical. It's fun. That's a good thing. It's not just sitting and taking a test. And it gives you, again, a fuller picture of what's happening and how it might be affecting your child in different areas of their life. And so we'll look at things like their motor development and their sensory motor skills, which is huge, right? Again, for those connections in the brain. And we'll also look at their cognitive levels as well. So again, looking at areas like attention, memory, inhibition, and reasoning. So usually we meet afterwards, about 24 to 48 hours afterwards, to go over the information. And Sometimes parents just want to know, they just want the assessment to know what's going on, and that's okay. I always say start with an assessment, because the more you know, again, the more powerful it is. And I do a lot of school meetings, so sometimes it's just, hey, for teachers or schools to be aware of, this is what's going on with my kiddo, this is what I was able to assess, because what they assess is very different than what we assess, right? Whether it's at a public school and they already have a IEP or 504, or just accommodations you want the teachers to do in the classroom setting, or even if it's a private school. I've done a lot of that too, where they can't necessarily give you all the services you need, but they can still make those tweaks in that classroom environment. So just let me know, all right? And for those who are on today and hearing about this, we are offering an assessment special. So just reach out if you're interested in learning more, but it is limited. So just let me know by the end of the week. Okay, reach out and just let whoever answers phone know, whether it's me or Kenny or coordinator, know that you're a part of this workshop. So we're a solution that works. We've been around for over 10 years now. We've worked with nearly 50,000 families, and again, doing research with other really key organizations and really high success rate. And I really invite you to come, discover life after brain balance. These students here have all had different challenges, from sensory processing challenge of what they were wearing, to focus and attention for sure, dyslexia, the two boys on the left there, really severe dyslexia, and used to fight just reading the title of a book. Or one of our students, Ethan, 12 years old, already was considering careers that had nothing to do with reading, right? He was limiting himself. And after just a few months, again, just the sky's limit. He's happy, he's more regulated at home, more confident. Actually, Ava, this top corner here, very shy originally, and she just led her 8th grade commencement speech. It was amazing, and played a piano thing. So it's really great. And from students who are maybe called to the office often, and parents are called home. Dakota here in the middle right there, she got in trouble a lot. Learning was hard for her, and this last year was a complete turnaround. So we're really proud of our students and the hard work that they put in, but it is a team effort. Families involved. Not just us, and the students have to put in the work too, but in a matter of months, like I said, we can really make a difference. So learn more, or I invite you to stay connected with us. We have a couple books that we recommend. Disconnected Kids, for sure, start there. Helps you understand what I talked about today and how the brain connections affect learning and other disorders, and what you can do about it. So the actual activities as well. But you can also call me, of course, or email us to learn more. Again, send some folks out our way if you think they can benefit. And on social media, we have a lot of resources too. So if you're not already following us, go on Facebook. We have Brain Balance San Diego and Chula Vista, as well as Instagram. And then YouTube, I mentioned, is where a lot of our previous workshops and infographics as well are there. So check that out. And then our website itself, brainbalancesandiego.com, has more information, as well as blogs and other on-demand webinars you may be interested in too. Okay. All right, and then a couple upcoming events. We are hosting a back to school prep. So like I said, how do you make that transition, get going? Maybe you need some assessment help before the school year starts. So both our San Diego location in Rancho Carmel Mountain, Carmel Mountain Ranch, sorry, Carmel Mountain Ranch off Rancho Carmel Drive is on Thursday the 12th, and then in Chula Vista, right in the heart of Chula Vista Village on F and 3rd, we have one Wednesday the 18th, and both are from 4 to 6 p.m. Open drop-in, just RSVP, let us know you're coming in, and we'll help you out, okay? I think that is all. So thank you for bearing with me. I try to keep it short. That was an hour. Questions?
Let me first say thank you so much, Amanda. That was great information. I really am a true believer in purpose. And so one of the things that I got off the bat is that in San Diego County, actually all of California, as of July 1st, was a program called Self-Determination. So in the past, people were just going to the agencies and support that was available. Now parents and families are going to be able to choose resources such as yourself. Yeah. I just had a call this morning with someone where I'm like, okay, this would be perfect. But I'm going to ask one question, because I know everybody's going to probably want to know, can you share the slides with me so I can share them with people? Yeah. And then I took the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I used that, but the way that you guys have it focused, and I'm going to ask for permission to use it. is because I saw that as agencies, a lot of times we come in all the way up at self-fulfillment needs.
Yeah.
And that's what
Yeah.
we're tasked to do.
Mhm.
And it's like through COVID, our disparity team was finding out, listen, we can't even talk to them about services until we speak to, did they have food? We had to refer people to food banks. We had to, you know, their safety. Older people didn't feel safe going into the community. So this is excellent. So thank you again. And any questions from anyone, open up the mics and go for it.
I wanted to mention too, you were talking about the self-determination funds. So we are out of pocket because we are non-medical. We do not accept insurance. We can talk more about that later on if you're interested in options. However, we are out of pocket, and being non-medical, we do not diagnose either. So I can give you a good comprehensive look at what's happening with your kiddo, age 4 to 24 right now. We do have an adult program as well, but not at our centers yet. I just don't have the capacity for that yet. But we do get a lot of adults asking, what can you do for me, especially parents?
Yeah.
But we are a great resource in the community, hopefully, and funds like the self-determination funds can be used with us. We are evidence-based, so yeah, let us know if you have more questions about that before we get.
Absolutely, you'll be receiving an email. Anybody else? Well,
Amanda,
why don't
it was great.
Let's see. There's
Regina, go ahead.
No, I was just saying, Amanda, it was great. Thank you for everything. I did learn a lot. I do have a question. I'm just kind of curious. You know, I work with some individuals who maybe overstimulated.
Yes.
Got a lot going on, and it's kind of, you know. Then we talked about the impulse control and how can we kind of refocus that, those impulses and those behaviors, inappropriate behaviors, but a lot of times it's because they're overstimulated. What's some advice there for helping them refocus?
Yeah, so if they're being overstimulated, one of the basic things is remove those distractions in the room, right? Maybe where they're learning is not appropriate. Maybe you just need simple, like, what is it? Those security blinds, like just like folders that you put up at the desk to block out all the stimuli. So I know in schools, they do that for like test taking, for instance. You can do that at home too. So maybe moving rooms is not ideal, or you're unable to take away all the stimuli and the siblings around, but maybe you put up those privacy boards so that there's less stimuli around, right? Also consider again things like temperature, their ergonomics of the seat. Are they comfortable? Can their basic needs be met first, and then are they fed? That's important. So I would start with those little basic things. If there's more sensory sensitivities happening, then there might be, those sensory processing disorders actually, or challenges, maybe not a full disorder, but there's a little bit, enough to distract them. Like you said, we have a really great multiple sensory sensitivities workshop on our YouTube channel and our website. So I would encourage you to look at that too. That's one of our most viewed videos, is understanding sensory sensitivities. So oftentimes there's folks who are sensory avoidant, sensory seeking, or a combination of both. So even if you reduce the distractions, maybe your kiddo is a sensory seeking individual. And so maybe they need something like deep pressure, like a weighted blanket to help them focus. Maybe they need a beanbag to sit in and just be engulfed. And that oftentimes helps with the auditory processing as well. So maybe they need to sit in a beanbag and work versus sitting upright, like sit upright at the table. Like not everyone works that way, right? Not everybody's body functions that way.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah, great question.
Anyone else? Well, fantastic. Thank you all for joining. Let's give Amanda a Zoom applause. Thank you so much. We really appreciate it, you being here, and we're looking forward to some great things and some partnerships coming up here very soon.
Yeah, for sure. I look forward to it. Yeah, share the word, share the meeting, and hopefully I'll be in touch with some of you later on, okay?
Absolutely. Everyone have a great rest of your day.
Take care.
All right, bye-bye.